Hello, welcome to this edition of the umgoblue.com podcast. This is Phil Callahan along with,
Clint Derringer.
and we're here to talk about Michigan's defeat versus Oklahoma.
We brought him in. We just said, like, if you think the game is over right now, then I think you shouldn't be in the locker room, And the guys really responded at that point. We didn't finish, but I thought they fought their tails off for four quarters. We just got to be cleaner and execute better.
Michigan fell by a score of 24-13 on the road. Well, Clint, what'd you think about that one?
Well, the score was pretty close to what I thought. On our preview podcast, I said I thought 27-17, a 10-point loss. They ended up losing by 11. If both teams had made all their field goals, would have been 27-16. So scoreboard wise, it felt about as I expected. Just again, early season road game, always going to be tough. Young team. I think it was made worse when we found out early that there were some injury problems. Marlon Klein didn't play at all after being the leading receiver in week one. That was a bummer to find out at the first snap. And then El Hadi gets hurt and goes out early in the first quarter and just did not feel good the rest of the game. So never really had a great feeling in terms of expecting a win. And then we got in there and sure seemed like Oklahoma was giving Michigan chances. There were opportunities there to maximize, and they just didn't get it done. So felt a little bit even worse than I thought, just because I expected the score, but I obviously I'm still a fan. It's not like I wanted them to lose. So as I was in the middle of the game and rooting and the family and I were all rooting them on, felt like they were letting opportunities slip by, and that was extra painful. So, it makes sense what happened, but still wasn't fun to watch.
So, a couple thoughts. I made the trek down to Oklahoma. Highly recommend it. Amazing atmosphere, great people, great stadium. What's interesting about down there is that the stadium is right on campus. So you park a few blocks away and you walk across campus to get to the football stadium, and it is just wall-to-wall tailgates. So just, again, I can't say enough good things about the good people of Oklahoma. The day before, the day after, on campus, nice folks, amazing atmosphere. Another thing that I'd say is that you have no idea how loud those guns are until you're in the stadium. I was rewatching the game, and the way they had the audio tuned, you barely heard them in the broadcast. But let me tell you, when you're in the stadium, it's loud. And again, you got the wagon driving around, which always seems just ready to tip over. So again, atmosphere, 10 out of 10. So as far as the game goes, we talked about this in the pregame podcast. And I have to tip my hat. You're right. You successfully predicted the score. What was disappointing to me was you're there and you're watching the first half, and it seemed like Michigan was stubbornly trying to just play smash football. And the offensive line just isn't there yet. Okay. I don't know if they're ever going to get there, but they're not there yet. So I'm wondering when the injury to Klein became apparent, because what struck me in breaking down Michigan's play calls in the first half is Bryce would have very much benefited from being able to dump off to the tight end. And it's as if that whole section of the playbook just got ripped out. So you're watching it, and as I said, I rewatched it again last night, and it's like Michigan's offensive philosophy in the first half was run up the middle, run up the middle, run up the middle, and hope for Oklahoma penalty. And it was baffling to see. So when we look at the score, Oklahoma scored a touchdown in the first quarter, and Oklahoma touchdown in the second quarter. Um, Michigan had that lightning strike of a touchdown to start the third quarter, and then two field goals. Oklahoma had another touchdown in the third quarter, a field goal in the fourth quarter, and again with a score of 24-13. But I will tell you, Clint, that the feeling in the stadium was, despite that touchdown run, that electric run by Justice Haynes, Michigan had nothing going on offense, nothing consistent. So it felt you could just feel the game getting further and further away. And I had the thought that watching Oklahoma, and I tweeted this during the game, is watching that second half. This is what happens when you have a competent offensive line and a good quarterback. They were just strangling the game. They were you know, just strangling the clock and keeping the ball away from Michigan. So frustrating. There were some good things, but what are your thoughts on how that game turned out?
Well, let's start really high level. My first takeaway starts with Sharon Moore, and I don't understand how you punt from the opponent's 38-yard line when you've got a kicker who's capable of making 50-yard field goals.
And Clint, let me jump in there. Not only did he do that at the 38, but in the press conference, he's like, "Well, we were at the 40," and I'm like, "No, you," and I'm just shaking my head, "No, you weren't." So just there already seems to be a little bit of spin there. So
Yeah,
here,
and
sorry to interrupt.
it's okay. Anybody that listens to you and I um, knows, you know, that I track the net punting stuff closer than anybody really should or anybody should care about. So even without the math, even without the metrics, if you decide to punt from the opponent's 38-yard line, you're saying we're going to pin them to their own goal line, right? We're going to pin them inside the 10. That's the goal, from a high level, and let our defense, create a turnover because we're going to get a new set of downs pretty close to this same field position, right? That's what you're trying to do. So not only was the decision conservative, not only did you not show any trust or faith in your kicker, which makes no sense to me unless they know something that we don't know, but then you punt it and it goes into the end zone for a touchback, which means they start not pinned to their own goal line, but they actually start at the 20-yard line, which is a gain in field position of 18 yards. That net punt decision gained you 18 yards. And instead of trying to go for it, I think on 4th and 2, you're showing no confidence in your offensive line, no confidence in your quarterback. Again, maybe that's justified. Maybe they know that the offensive line is just not that good and that the quarterback is just not that good. But I think you still have to trust your players. And Sharon Moore, in previous examples, has shown that he'll be aggressive and show that kind of confidence in the guys at the right times. We saw him go for it on 4th down on his own side of the field against Ohio State in the biggest moment of the whole season. So I just don't understand it. I don't know that we're going to get any explanation. And then how it actually played out could not have been worse. To punt conservatively, show no confidence in your offensive unit, and then gain only 18 yards for it. So that seemed strange. It seemed like there is something that we don't know that is handcuffing the offensive unit, whether it's injuries specific to this game. Like I said, it was clear that we missed Marlon Klein. Definitely you're missing, El Hadi. Those are two captains. You're replacing those guys with young guys. Hogan Hansen hasn't been 100%. He was getting more run. The third string tight end was really getting the lion's share of the reps. So I get it. I certainly get, being hamstrung from a personnel standpoint. And if that's what was happening, then that's what was happening. But from a very high level, I'd much rather see the the head coach trying to be aggressive and showing confidence in his team. And if you go down with, you know, with that particular path, then at least you went down with showing confidence in your guys rather than questioning them. So it, it is what it is. Again, I don't think that that is a major takeaway, but it is the first thing that kind of hit me in the face because it kind of rolls into the next thing where it seems like the offensive unit, not only in terms of their execution, which was poor and sloppy and ugly, but also the play calling, which is what most fans, that's most of what you and I have heard since, is that, oh, they're too conservative. Oh, it's a lot like the Penn State game from 2023. We can't block their defensive line, so the play calling is run, 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 punt, run, 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 punt, run, 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 punt. Um, and that may be, there's certainly some element of truth there. I think that game, especially against Penn State, we know J.J. McCarthy got dinged up in that game in the national championship run and really hampered the team going forward at the next week against Maryland. And then it was successful, right? You made it work on the road against Penn State. You found a way to win the game. We all bragged about it and thumped our chest about being able to throw the ball one time in the second half and beat Penn State on the road. So why wouldn't he come back and do the same thing in a big spot on the road, try to protect a quarterback? So part of that makes sense. I don't think Chip Lindsey is the root cause of what we saw on last Saturday. I think there was a specific high level game plan or strategy to stay conservative, to make sure you're protecting Bryce physically, protecting him mentally. And he was kind of handcuffed, I think, with what he could call. So that's kind of the second takeaway. And then third is not only was there kind of a protect Bryce mentality, at least it seemed to me, when Underwood did have his chances, he didn't execute well. He didn't throw the ball well. He went 9 for 21, which is not great. And I think his decision making may have also been hampered. I know at least a couple times that it seemed to me where there were run pass options where the decision was incorrect. So I think it was a learning experience for your freshman quarterback on the road in a big spot for the first time. And I still have the utmost confidence that Bryce Underwood is going to be a really, really good quarterback this year. I think he struggled a little bit, and I think it's going to be a learning experience. And I don't expect the offense to look the same going forward. Still, though, open question as to how much better. I think this offense is much closer to what we saw against New Mexico, which is okay to sometimes good. Not the what we saw against Oklahoma, which was bad to sometimes incapable. So I still have some optimism going forward, and I'm going to hold most of the craziest criticism or the sharpest criticism because I think there was already some conservatism with Bryce Underwood, and when he wasn't very sharp and wasn't seeing things real well, I think they really decided, you know what, let's make sure that we protect everybody here.
So regarding the field goal decision, right? So there's a point where, um, you know, Coach Moore was asked about it, and he said this.
For us, there's all those type of decisions that you got to make, and there's an analytics piece of it, but there's also a feeling of how you feel in the game in those certain situations of how the defense is playing and what you're doing. So it's a collective thought process when we do that for sure.
And you get the analytics answer in real
Oh
time.
yeah, you get the analytics answer in real time. Yeah, this says 4th or 2, 4th or 1 or better, 4th or 4 or better, and sometimes when it says 4th or 5 or better, I'm like, I don't know about that one. That's a long distance at certain times. So um, usually just go with the gut.
He says, well, it's analytics and it's gut. I'm like, well, wait a minute. So, did the analytics say that you were suddenly going to be running an explosive offense? Because anybody watching that game, that's not what their gut was saying, right? So again, you have this incredible weapon, Zavada. You're expecting, not an explosive game. Every point is valuable, and you don't take the shot. So I agree with you. I believe there was something going on, and we don't know what that was, right? But it is interesting that, in the weeks running up to this game, there Zavada himself was talking about how, you know, 60-yard field goal, maybe even longer with the wind, right? And then you get into a position that is again, a long field goal, but one we would expect. And then he misses a gimme, right?
Right. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
and I'll tell you, um, one of the things that impressed me about Oklahoma was it was a natural surface, which you don't see much of, okay, anymore. It was a great surface, but again, it was a natural surface. It's not what you practice on all the time. And we know that Michigan does have a grass practice field, but again, most of the time they practice on an artificial surface. So, okay, we wonder if something's going on there. Okay. The other thing that was clear was in warm-ups, prior to warm-ups, they were working Gio El Hadi to see if he was going to be able to go. Okay. They were giving him quite a workout before he got dressed in pads. So you're wondering, okay, was he dinged up before the game even started? Okay, and I think that's an open question, right? So you're watching that first half, and I'll tell you, it was like a nightmare repeat from last season. There were guys on the offensive line getting blown back into the backfield.
Hmm.
Not every play, not the same guy every time, but enough that when you're breaking down the film, you just see an offensive lineman way further back than he should be, right? And again, that was all last year. So again, Gio gets hurt. You have to do a substitution, and you're just wondering, okay, between uh, you know the offensive line being dinged up, having your captain out with Gio being out of the game, having your tight end out who was one of your primary offensive weapons, it almost seemed like the play calling turtled up. And again, run up the middle. Hey, that's fine when you're winning, right? When you're trying to preserve victory like against Penn State, and it's great when you have a great offensive line, but it was frustrating being there, seeing it. It was frustrating watching the tape again. And then you know, Coach Moore said something else in the Monday press conference about, hey, and I think this is particularly telling, right? So Monday night we see JJ McCarthy light up the fourth quarter and end the game with a quarterback run, right? So Coach Moore got the question about, hey, you got this amazing athlete. Did you consider having him run more? And he says,
We will at some point. Just you run your quarterback, you better have two. And I've always believed that. Even did that with JJ. JJ wanted to run every game, and I was like, no, no, you're gonna get hit, you're gonna get hurt, something. So um, we will, and I think there's parts in that we tried to in that game. They just were pretty good at not letting us because they didn't want him to run. And I think there's ways we can get him to run in different ways and make sure he's protected. So we'll work that as we go game by game and have a strategy for that.
and I get what you're saying, but wait, does that mean you don't have two quarterbacks? Which opens up a whole nother, Pandora's box, right? And again, I really think it comes back to that you're trying to keep Bryce Underwood healthy, keep him contained, be uh, careful, right? But honestly, last year we saw almost the same exact offense struggle the same exact way almost all season. And what we said was, well, it's like that because we don't have a talented quarterback. I will tell you this, Clint. This was the closest that I was able to get to Bryce Underwood. One of the nice things about going on the road is that they let the media down on the field beforehand. He's an amazing athlete. He may be one of the most gifted athletes I've ever seen, and I don't say that lightly. I mean, he's the real deal. You know, you see him working out, you see him going through drills, and it's night and day compared to what we had at the quarterback position last year. No disrespect to those guys, but just he's on a different level. It's unbelievable. The first thing I thought is, oh my God, this guy was playing against high school kids last year. How unfair was that? I mean, he's a man among men on the college field. So you have this amazing weapon, and you're having him hand off, and you're not um, letting him run. And I again I really this is not a criticism towards Bryce. This is a criticism toward the play calling. And again, I don't know if it's Chip. I don't think it is either. But this is a criticism of Sharon Moore that um, as difficult as this game was to watch, this was a winnable game. Okay, and I think that's what frustrated me watching it is, you know, you can play well and lose and be you're never happy, but you understand it, right? You do everything you can. You leave it all out on the field. Watching this, I mean, and it really comes back to there was this huge momentum swing in the game, right? Um, Oklahoma gave up, committed penalties to keep Michigan's drive alive. You're driving all the way down, and time is running out in the second quarter. Michigan is getting the ball to start the third quarter, and it's 7-0, and you're expecting that field goal, right? You miss the field goal, and then Oklahoma marches right down the field. And instead of it being potentially 7-3 or 7-7 at half, it's 14-0. And and 14 points seemed like an insurmountable mountain. Okay, that's how it felt in the stadium. And you know what? Looking at the score, it was. And that should not be the case when you have Bryce Underwood at quarterback. That is coaching malpractice. That should not happen. Okay, we should not struggle to score points the way we did last year with the patchwork of quarterbacks we had. And I think that's really what kind of made me sick to my stomach is I'm watching last year's game with this year's quarterback. And again, very disappointing.
Well, of course, it's super disappointing to see, and it's more frustrating because everybody. It's easy to see the difference at the quarterback position this year compared to last year in talent, for sure. But 18-year-old freshman quarterback, first start on the road against the best defense that we're going to see for the first 11 games until probably the Ohio State. I will guess that Ohio State's defensive unit ends up a little higher than Oklahoma's, but by far the best. Other than that, it the Bryce Underwood that everybody has in their mind is the Bryce Underwood from week 1 against New Mexico at home and a 5-star recruit, number 1 in the country. He is those things as well, right? But that was freshman Bryce Underwood. It was just, he was not at his best in that game. And he's
Okay,
going to learn
Clint,
from it.
I got to interrupt you, okay? Bryce Underwood handing the ball off had nothing to do with Bryce Underwood being a freshman in that first half.
I'm not sure that's true. I think some of those were RPOs where the throw was open and he did not throw it. I think Bryce Underwood made bad decisions and handed the ball off more times than he was supposed to. So, I mean, we'll never know. We don't get to hear the calls. But when I rewatched it, I saw what looked like RPOs to me where the ball should have come out and been thrown, and it did not happen. So maybe we're running RPOs and saying hand it off. It's possible. That would be an indictment of the coach that I would agree with you, but I think it's more likely that the freshman quarterback was a little bit mind spinning, and maybe it was one bad decision and they shut it down. Maybe it was two or three bad decisions and they shut it down. Maybe all of them were RPO decisions that were bad. But I chalk this up to 18-year-old freshman quarterback and two really, really costly injuries on the offensive unit. I don't think that there's much more to carry forward from the offensive performance. Question marks, certainly. Still things, question marks that we had to start are now, there's more red lights flashing on the dashboard, to use one of your phrases that I like. But this particular game, Bryce Underwood and how Chip Lindsey used Bryce Underwood does not concern me. I think it was a rough game for Bryce, and I think the offensive coordinator had to call it the way that he did, um, to try to stay out of trouble.
So, in addition to the sputtering offense in the first half, the broadcast picked up some uh, chatter between Justice Haynes and Bryce, and Justice had this to say about it after the game.
We're just competitors. We want to do what's best for the team. We good. That's my brother. I love him. Um, we're gonna be just fine. Yeah, just a miscommunication. We all good.
Mhm.
It's interesting because they very clearly, before they came to the interview room, had their story straight, right? Sharon said the same thing. Justice Haynes said the same thing. And listen, I don't have a problem with guys uh, going at each other, right? I think that is just something that happens, in the competitive fire. I'll tell you the other thing about Oklahoma is that it was an incredibly tight sideline, right? So and to put it in perspective, on both sidelines, it was so tight that the photographers had to go out into the concourse, cross out of the field of play, and then come back on the other side. It was an incredible tight sideline. So you have the player, you have the fans hanging right on the players. So that doesn't exactly lend itself to calm, cool discussions. Um, so again, all eyes on you. I don't have a problem with them, jabbering at each other. I think, again, and to your point, there's some discussion on that was Justice letting Bryce know that perhaps he didn't make the best decisions, right? And again, you're gonna see that they're both younger players. They both have the competitive fire. They both want to win. So it's that didn't bother me as much as some people made it out. I'll tell you what did bother me was Samaj Morgan getting the late hit and nobody saying anything, right? And that is a again, it's yes, it's a boom boom play, and but that's the kind of thing where when that happens, somebody needs to. That's the time you need to get on the refs. Okay, that's the time where somebody needs to say something to protect the player, right? And on the broadcast, they noticed it like 20 seconds later, right? And I'll tell you, at the stadium, I saw it right away and was like, "Whoa, what happened with Samaj?" Right? Knocked down, you know, walking out the field, falling down. Overall, I think the calls definitely favored Michigan. I mean, some of the penalties that were called against Oklahoma, but that was a big miss. And I don't, again, when it comes to player safety, that's one that I wish they had put a more finer point on with the referees.
Yeah, two things. I made mention of this early, during the game also. Later in the game, the broadcast threw it to the referee correspondent or whatever to ask whether he thought a hit on TJ Guy by TJ Guy was late. It was an incomplete pass. He hit the receiver after. Um, Tough to tell if he saw that the ball was caught and when he saw it, whatever. he didn't tackle him all the way to the ground, put his shoulder kind of in his back and his ribs. Um, so to kind of ask the referee, was that late after highlighting and replaying the hit on Samaj Morgan, was frustrating for sure. Like that one clearly late and did a ton of damage. And that's the bigger point for me was I don't know what was different about what we saw from Samaj Morgan after that hit and what we saw from Shane Morris that got Brady Hoke into all the fire. I know now that it's an independent medical professional on the sideline that makes those decisions. Somebody, some doctor, independent from the team, cleared Samaj to play and go back into the game. That's what we would assume based on how the rules are set up now after that. But I can tell when you see a guy that can't run and when he falls down, he didn't even brace himself. He just fell over. Um, in my mind, as a coach, as a parent, there's no way that kid should have been back in the game. So I'm not trying to create problems for sure, but somebody watch those two replays of Shane Morris in 2014 and Samaj Morgan at Oklahoma, and you tell me what's different.
Well, Clint, I will tell you, not only was it a late hit, it was a cheap hit. Okay. So uh, when it happened, I'm like, well, that was cheap. And then it was helmet to helmet. And you just wonder, again, I can't, I don't know that there was ill intent. Okay. But it was bad. And it was funny because I was thinking the same thing. You know, I was there when it happened to Shane Morris, right? And you're sitting there watching it going, holy crap. And it was like everybody in the stadium saw it except for the coaches, right? I mean, that one was at home, everybody had the focus on. And you look at it and it it was similar. And again, there's a protocol now. They said in the broadcasting went to the 10, he got evaluated, but I think that was the one, again, great atmosphere, great game. That was the one thing I just, you don't like to see that, right? So again, um, lots of things to kind of chew on as you're watching this game. And again, the frustrating thing to me is I just had the same sick feeling as watching mid-season last year of the offense can't get out of its way. And I see your point about potentially that some of the plays were supposed to be RPOs. What I would have liked to have seen, it's long been my opinion, okay, that when young players enter the game, okay, no matter how talented you are, you're going to make mistakes, okay? And Clint, I remember, watching high school football, right, of which, you and I were involved with. There'd be some superstar stud on JV, and the question would be, well, his parents want him to stay on JV and be a rock star. And sometimes the coaches want to bring him up as a sophomore to go to varsity, right? And to me, it was very clear. Bring him up as a sophomore, let him get his jitters out as a 10th grader so that he can be successful later. Because everybody has jitters, right? Like everybody struggles a little bit. So what I would have liked to have seen is even if we were going to lose this game on a Bryce Underwood mistake, let him make his mistakes. Let's see what you got. So I was frustrated at the play calling, and I still I'm playing the tapes of the handoff, especially in the second quarter, and just frustrated by the play calling. And again, I think that may have had a lot to do with the tight end being out. That's a really nice big target that can do a lot of things. So hopefully, as Michigan gets its full arsenal of tools back for Bryce uh, to compete with, that we'll see more. And listen, I said it, a little bit ago. Bryce Underwood's one of the most amazingly talented athletes I've ever seen, and yet conversely, I said, but he doesn't have the experience yet. So I do agree with you that it's not like you're gonna let him go and he's gonna throw for 400 yards. But it's kind of like, well, if we were going to lose, I would have liked to have seen more shots, right?
Hmm.
And I just don't, you know, quite possibly with the struggles at the offensive line and with Klein being out, we just weren't gonna, this is what we're gonna see. I do not want to see this offense like this very often for the rest of the year. Okay, you have too many tools. Again, I just, I'm hoping, and I'll tell you that the concern that I have is when I was breaking the takedown and seeing offensive line players knocked back. Okay, in a few cases knocked on their back. Like that just shouldn't happen at this level. Okay, I'm hoping, as you mentioned, that it's because this defense is that they opposed is very good. Okay, I'm not expecting to see that against Central. I'm not even expecting to see that against Nebraska. So these next two games will be very telling for me as we break down the film on the offensive line.
Yeah, and I know you're having traumatic flashbacks to the 2024 offense, but I also put out there during the game, I was having traumatic flashbacks to the 2024 defense. That despite having guys, really good players, and depth and an aggressive mindset, they just cannot make the right big play on third down. It's so frustrating. And in this game, there was one particular drive that was the absolute flashpoint for me. It was back to back plays on one series, but the first play was a missed sack. So Wink calls a blitz, delivers the guy unblocked to the quarterback. This particular play is not on a Wink Martin play call. He called the right thing. This should have been a sack. In fact, I think it was the same blitz three times that he delivered a guy, three different guys, unblocked to the quarterback and only got one sack out of it. The first one, or I don't remember if it was first, second, or third. I think the second one is when Jaden Mangum actually made the sack. I think this was the third one late in the game, had to have a stop. You delivered an unblocked defender. I want to say it was Hillman, 6. And he just doesn't break down and doesn't make the tackle on Mateer. And the broadcast can't wait to talk about how Mateer squats 500 pounds, and all of that. And you do have to tip your cap when the other guy's a good athlete. They get scholarships too in the NIL era. They get paid too. So you do have to give him credit for making a play, but just break down and wrap the guy up. Wait for your help. Get your arms on him, right? You just ran by him full speed, never broke down, doesn't get the sack, makes scrambles out of there, makes a play. Very next play is the pass play that Jair Hill gets his hands on, makes a really, really great play to recover, to get back into phase after getting beat off the line. It was amazing that he even got his hands on the ball. So, but he does get both hands on the ball, does not catch it. It goes up into the air. He gets a second chance to catch it, and he doesn't. That was it. That was the summary of the defense so far through two games. Like, guys, make the play. Make the play. You're in the spot. Make the play. And maybe that comes with experience. We definitely saw last year's defense get better and make the plays over time. But we thought we were kind of starting this year where last year ended. And I no longer feel that way. It feels like this year is starting maybe a little bit ahead of where last year started in terms of execution and making the plays in the big spots. Hopefully, it doesn't take as long to ramp up. Hopefully, they can make some key plays soon here. But I will be keeping a very, very close eye on third down defense this coming Saturday, because what we've seen through 2 weeks has not been great. And against Oklahoma, just was flat out not good. Has to be better. You guys, they got to make plays on third down and get off the field.
Definitely, when you were there and watching the game even on film, what I really give Oklahoma credit for is Michigan would almost stop them on defense, and they would come back and shoot the dagger, right? like there was that one play where it was nearly intercepted, and they just shook it off and came back the next play. So again, when I was watching it and commenting on X during the game, it was this is what a good offensive line and a quarterback does, right? They just okay, hey, almost doesn't count, right? And there was a whole bunch of woulda, coulda, shoulda on Michigan's defense, and Oklahoma just answered back. So it'll be interesting to see how good they are throughout the rest of the season. And it'll be also interesting to see how Michigan's offense ascends. Okay. So to put it in perspective for me, so I'm looking at the rushing stats. Michigan ran for 146 yards. Half of those was on one play. Okay. One play accounted for half of those yards.
Oh yeah.
That's just horrible. Okay. And, 9 for 24, again, 142 yards. When you look at 9 for 24, again, like you said, kid who's 18 years old, amazing talents. But when I look at the stats, okay, Samaj Morgan was completely taken out of the game. Okay. And, I think we can look back to that, to him being dinged up. Then, you have Donovan McCulley, 3 receptions, 91 yards, great, but not nearly enough, right? So when I'm looking at the stats and I put my hand over the names, man, it looks a lot like some of the games last year, and that's not what I want to see.
Yeah, 24% success rate overall for the offense. Running plays 25%, passing plays 23%. I mean, that's it. That's it. You got to get 5 yards on first down. You got to get 3 or 4 on second down. You got to convert on third. And they just didn't. They didn't. They weren't good enough to win that game. They were lucky to be as close as they were. And, that's it. They got to play better. And the season will be defined by how they learn from what happened last Saturday, and to a certain extent will be defined on how much of those injuries kind of linger going forward, because those spots, tight end and offensive line, are not places where Michigan is particularly deep. So those are the things for me. I expect them to get better. It was worse than I thought, but I'm most concerned about the injuries. I know Bryce Underwood's going to bounce back. I know Chip Lindsey can threaten the entire field with his playbook. Those are things that I don't have questions about, even though we didn't see it in Norman, Oklahoma. So my concerns are injury related and seeing those guys execute in big spots.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the UMGoBlue.com podcast. This is Phil Callahan along with
Clint Derringer.
Go Blue.
Go Blue.
Going to be violent, going to be physical, want to be explosive. So we're creating explosive runs and want more, want to create more explosive passes. We will do that, but just consistent, consistent as we go through every single game, and let the players just trust themselves and let it loose, have fun. And I think they'll do that as we go through the week.
Thank you for listening to the UMGoBlue.com podcast. All rights reserved.